Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Democracy Briefing Podcast. It's episode number 2. Thank you so much for joining us again. If you watched episode 1, or if this is your first visit to our podcast, welcome to the show. My name is Edward Wardley Wardle, and I am the presenter of the Democracy Briefing Podcast. Today, we're going to be looking at a new mayoralty, which is coming into formation on the 1st of May, election same day, obviously. And the election is for the Hull and East riding of Yorkshire Authority, a brand new combined authority, a brand new electorate area, and very interesting. No previous elections, obviously, so we will be getting a new set of data on the 1st of May. Without further ado, I will switch over to slides, so let's go. Point of reference, thank you very much for watching whilst I have a rotten cold at the end of April 25, so if I'm sounding croaky, I am struggling to get through with a voice, but it's important we get these out before the election because they're completely redundant after the election, and we'll just do the election review show. So, like I said, it's the Hull and East Yorkshire Combined Authority. So, what is the Hull and East Yorkshire Combined Authority? When was it formed? What's going on? Good questions. The Combined Authority devolution agreement between the Labour National Government and the constituent local councils was agreed in February. This has created the Hull and East Yorkshire Combined Authority, or Heyca. They all have an abbreviation, some better sounding than others, but the Heyca is the Combined Authority abbreviation. Much like the other Metro Mayors, if you watch any of our other episodes, the responsibilities of the Metro Mayor will be on transport, regional planning, skills and employment. There will also likely be other devolved powers coming in the near future as the Labour government rolls out further powers and money. In the first instance, Heyca will receive a £13.4 million investment fund to boost economic growth in the area. But like I said, likely to be many more powers coming down the line as further devolution settlements agreed. In terms of where it is in the country, it's in the northeast. It's the eastern portion of Yorkshire. Yorkshire obviously being split into 4. So you have South Yorkshire here, West Yorkshire here, North Yorkshire here, and then the Hull and the East and the riding East. God, come on, Ed. Hull and the East Yorkshire Combined Authority here in the ready colour. Apologies if it's not ready, but I am severely colourblind. Next slide. It gives a bit more detail on the area. So the Combined Authority covers 2 local authority areas, the City of Hull and the East Riding of Yorkshire. And here on the right, we have the detail with Hull shaded orange, as it is currently being run by the Liberal Democrat Party, and then the East Riding of Yorkshire, which has no overall control, so it's in a grey. So you have a very urban area in Hull, and then you have suburban and rural in the other local authority. So 2 quite different authorities with very different politics. And we'll see that come to play in later slides when we talk about the MPs that are elected and the councillors. But yeah, very different electorates, but strategically they've decided to come together to form this combined authority because they want a mayor to deliver those big strategic projects and infrastructure. Right, overview of Heyca. So 2,000 residents, making it one of the smaller combined authorities. And it would probably be in bottom 2 from memory. The gross value added is also quite low, 13 billion. That compares with, say, Heyca, which we talked about last week, as 35 billion. And GVA it's the gross value added, but really that is your domestic product before a region. The average house price in Hull is £133,000. UK average is £285,000. Housing significantly cheaper. Employment rate is 74.8%. Which ranks at 3rd, so that's pretty good employment rate, but has the lowest median salary of any combined authority. Employment's high, but the wages are low. Our foreign listeners will be screaming out. But what about Humberside? So for reference, Hull and East Yorkshire was part of the county of Humberside from 74 to 96, and this was disbanded by the major government. Much like in our episode about Heyca, Humberside was disbanded in 96, much like Avon in the southwest was disbanded. And so it was split into 4 unitary authorities, and you can see them here on the right hand side of the map. The East Riding of Yorkshire, Kingston upon Hull, which is the city of, obviously. Then you have North Lincolnshire and North East Lincolnshire. And there's been a bit of a hangover for those. I have family from the area. Humberside struggled to maintain an identity, and I think there was lots of views locally about whether Humberside was a good idea or a bad idea, and whether it worked as a sort of polity. Much the same stuff happened in Southwest with Avon, with people not really being able to identify with Avon, or with accusations from people in more rural regions, from the more conservative side of the political spectrum, thinking that they're being dominated by the more left-wing centre of gravity, the larger towns and cities. In Humberside's case, that was Kingston upon Hull. But there was talk about, when this Metro Mayor was created for the green shaded area here, whether they would bring Lincolnshire and the East Riding of Yorkshire together, so this entire area of pink and this area of green coming together, or that Humberside would be recreated. And the decision in the end, with the negotiations with all the local councils and with the national government, that they wouldn't. So the East Riding of Yorkshire and Hull combined to create Heyca, and then Lincolnshire as a whole will have its own Metro Mayor, which we'll be covering in the next episode. So please do like and subscribe and be locked in for that next episode. To note, Humberside Police still exists and it's never been disbanded. So there is actually a police force area that covers where Heyca is and where North Lincolnshire and North East Lincolnshire are. And there will be, as ever, the Police and Crime Commissioner elections in 2028 for that, and every 4 years. So the Humberside Police will continue to exist in that format for the foreseeable. And what that means is that this mayor will never, whilst that boundary for the police exists, have policing given, devolved, granted to it. So many of the Metro Mayors do have policing powers. You think about London, West Midlands, Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, because they have contiguous boundaries. So the Police and Crime Commissioner, the office of the Police and Crime Commissioner could be dissolved, and that responsibility could be adopted by the Metro Mayor. But there are other Metro Mayors where their boundaries do not match up with the Police and Crime Commissioner area, and so they cannot take on those police and crime responsibilities, and there's quite a few like that. But Merseyside doesn't quite work. Those boundaries don't match up between Merseyside Police and the Mayor of Merseyside. And then in the case of the West of England Mayor only covers the area which would be called Avon, but the area of police is Avon and Somerset. So onwards we move. Key policy challenges. What will this Metro Mayor be thinking about? Well, it's a new Metro Mayor, and I think a lot of the first few years will be establishing the mayoralty and getting processes working. I've previously worked in combined authorities, and there are definitely varying degrees of maturity across those combined authorities. City Hall in London is extremely developed because that came into existence in the year 2000, whereas the more recent Metro Mayors have taken some time to get going, I think it's fair to say, and that's experience of what I saw working amongst Metro Mayors. So the new Mayor, outside of what I've got on this slide, is very much going to be prioritising establishing systems, getting a legal department together, getting together a procurement department, getting together individual departments for the policy areas that are on the page. So transport, they'll need a transport department, planning and housing, they'll need a department for that, potentially environment and other areas. So the establishment of that beyond the policy priorities on this page is really important. But yes, in terms of what's on this page, transport will be really, really important, and it will be a major area of devolution and further devolution. The Mayor will be responsible for the system management of that area, and will be responsible for trains and buses, active travel, which means walking and cycling, and then things, new novel and innovative areas of transport policy like e-bikes and scooters. The East Riding of Yorkshire in particular is rural with small towns, villages, and so buses will not be that profitable compared to much more urban areas, and that means that the Metro Mayor will be thinking about how to run those buses efficiently whilst budgets being under severe pressure, and inflation post the pandemic and post the war in Ukraine has been really challenging for all politicians wherever you are in the world. But in a transport perspective, running buses has got very expensive. Planning housing, all of the Metro Mayors have to develop and publish a spatial development strategy. And this covers the number of houses that will be built in both of the local council areas. This has to be done through negotiation. It's a joint piece of work between the combined authority and then the two local authorities that sit under it. And this will support the delivery of infrastructure and housing in that area. quite a contentious bit of work. Particularly, you have councils of different colours or councils that are very nervous about building lots of houses, and if you have people campaigning for the maintenance of the green belt, this is a tricky bit of work, and the Labour national government is requiring that the numbers of housing increases given the housing crisis. So a huge bit of work. And then further devolution. Like I've said in many of the videos that I've done, the Labour government is extremely keen on English devolution and giving further powers and responsibility and money, crucially, to the metro mayors to deliver services and infrastructure. The new mayor of the Heyca region will want to be negotiating with Angela Rayner and her department to get the best possible deal and the maximum amount of money for that region. Wider context, what's going on in the area. So we don't have any previous elections, so we don't have any data for this constituency area. That is, it is true of all our new metro mayors that we'll be talking about. So we've had to look at other areas of electoral evidence, which has been the MPs. But the other bit of context is previously in the UK, mayors and police and crime commissioners have been elected using the supplementary vote system, which is where you have a first place vote and a second place vote. So you get your first choice and then you have a second choice. You don't have to use your second choice, but you did have to use your first. This has now changed to first past the post, which is a simple plurality outside the UK, where it's the person with the most votes wins. It doesn't really matter what percentage you have. There's no proportional element. There's no second place, third place. It is simply first past the post, which is a racing term from horse racing. And this was a change made by the Conservatives in the previous Parliament just before the election. They lost the general election in 2024. Next slide. So the candidates this year, run through the candidates. So Margaret Pinder, Labour Party. She's run 4 times unsuccessfully, but is a prominent local activist. Twice ran for Parliament in 2015 and 2024. Came pretty close in 2024 for Parliament, but didn't win. And has twice run for councillor in 19 and 23. Again, lost both of those. So can she win it? Can she be 5th time lucky? Next up is Michael James Ross. He's a Lib Dem councillor and leader of Hull Council. Next up for the Greens, Perry Harrison. She's a former parliamentary candidate for Kingston upon Hull. For the Yorkshire Party, for those who aren't familiar, the Yorkshire Party is a newish party that has existed for about 10 years. Haven't had too much electoral success. I did my research and I think they have 3 councillors in the entirety of the UK, but they campaign for further devolution and for powers for Yorkshire. So Ian Scott is running for the Yorkshire Party, and he previously stood as MP for the Kingston upon Hull parliamentary seat, and didn't score many votes at all, but he's running again this time. And then we have Anne Handley. She's the leader of the East Riding of Yorkshire Council and is Conservative and likely to be pretty confident that she can win it. Same again for the Lib Dem candidate. And then the wild card in this election is Luke Campbell, MBE, who's a former Olympic gold medal boxing winner and is running for the Reform Party. So 6 candidates and a variety of politics running from the Greens on the far left all the way through to Reform on the far right. So an interesting election with quite a few possible winners. Let's have a look at the councillors for the region. So there are 2 councils, like I've said, Hull Council and then the East Riding of Yorkshire Council. 125 councillors in total, 58 in Hull and 67 in the East Riding of Yorkshire. And yes, in Hull, the Lib Dems running it with 29%, which is just over the 50% required to run it. Labour have 25 and Independents have 4. In terms of the East Riding of Yorkshire, it's a Conservative minority control council, and the last election was in 2023. The Dems have 21 councillors, Conservative 26, Labour 5, Reform and Yorkshire Party between them have 4, and then the Independents have 11. So across the piece, we've got 50 Lib Dems out of 125. So they have 40% of the MPs. Conservatives have just over 20% of the MPs. Labour have exactly 20% of the MPs, and then the rest have the rest. It is it is clearly for the Lib Dems a good region. across the two council areas. Looking at this, I think the Lib Dems, with the activists that they'll have and the numerous councillors across both regions, will fancy their chances in a year where the larger two parties are struggling to poll. Again, Reform only recently formed and become a force really in the last 12 months since Farage has retaken the leadership of the Reform Party, and the Yorkshire Party having a couple of councillors themselves. So we move on. Our latest bit of relevant electoral data is the most recent general election, and the map on the right of the screen has the detail. So there are three Conservative MPs, and they cover the area of the East Riding of Yorkshire, and then 3 Labour MPs for the city of Hull itself. So Labour has 3 in Hull, the Tories have 3 in the East Riding of Yorkshire. And before we go on to the data, just like to say that the turnout was much higher in the general election than we'd expect on the 1st of May for this local election. It'll be significantly lower, but it is useful data covering the whole region. So we've got loads of data on this page, and you're probably watching this on your phone, and it'd be great if you were watching it on a bigger screen. We've done the data crunching and amalgamated all the votes for the area, but it's worth saying that this the amount of votes that Labour have in particular, I think, is going to be significantly lower because of the way they're polling, and the Conservatives are also looking pretty ropey nationally. So there's real opportunities for Lib Dems and Reform here. We'll move on to the next slide, will give us a bit more detail. Across the region, the Conservatives got 26% of the vote, the Greens got 4 or 5% of the vote, Labour got 37%, Lib Dems 7.7%, Reform 21.9%, and then Yorkshire Party under 1%. So I think we can anticipate Yorkshire Party not doing too well in this election. I'd love to be surprised. It's always good to have new parties emerging and insurgently changing the political battlefield, but it's not looking good for the Yorkshire Party. But as you can see, Labour across the region less than a year ago dominated, and if this election would have been a year ago, they would have won, assuming that people had voted the same way for their MP as they voted for the mayor. We can't take for granted, but Labour doing very, very well last time round. And here's a state, thanks to the guys at Politico, the state of the elections on the 10th of April. Recent data from Politico. The poll of polls, Labour scored about 34% in the national poll in July last year, and that's tailed off to 24%. Reform have gained 10%, so you can always see that 10% switch between Reform and Labour. The Tories have stayed where they are in the low 20s, and they're on 22 at the minute. The Dems on 15, Greens on 9, and then the smaller parties beyond that, and regional parties that won't be relevant. You know, SNP in Scotland, Plaid in Wales. Obviously, we're not in Scotland or Wales, and they're not running candidates. So I haven't been able to find any local or regional polling that's been commissioned, which is a real shame. And I think that the polling companies have really dropped the ball here, frankly, because the Metro Mayor elections are so close, and they're likely to be really interesting races where any one of 4 parties in this region, I think, can win. And to use other examples, in Heyca, the Heyca West of England area, we think there's one of 5 parties could win. It's a 5-way marginal, which is extremely rare. Worth watching our previous episode if you haven't watched that on our YouTube channel. Please remember to like and subscribe. And the Greens here, I think, unlikely to push through. This isn't a region where the Greens are particularly strong. They polled under 5% last time round in July, and so it's unlikely that them or the Yorkshire Party are going to cut through. But yeah, between Labour, the Conservatives, Reform and Lib Dems, any of the parties could win. And I think Reform will be feeling pretty confident. Nigel Farage has spoken about winning the Greater Lincolnshire Mayor, but thinking they have a pretty good chance here as well. And I think if they are able to get their national polling figure of 24%, they will be in the top 2, and they put themselves in a very good position. Labour obviously are struggling with governing, which often happens to a governing party, the incumbent. Local elections become very difficult, midterm elections, and the Tories really under Kemi Bannadotte are not cutting through and not making the increases in opposition that you expect them to, mainly because of the huge exodus of their membership and voters to Reform, but also the questions around Badenoch's leadership of the Conservative Party. So, as the famous phrase goes, it is never dull in Hull, and we do have a 4-way marginal. There is no overwhelming favourite for this region, and I think any of the parties could win it if they can get out their vote, if they have a canny social media approach, and if they on the day of the vote can use their activists well and in an accurate way, locating their voters and just getting out that key vote, because turnout will be low, and it could be under 30%, but it will almost certainly not be above 40%. And when we do our review, we'll look at the turnouts in these elections. It is going to be a low turnout election, so if you can get out your vote, you have a very good chance of winning. Lib Dems, given that they govern Hull and have most councils across the region, with 50 out of 125, they've got 40% of the councillors. They're going to be feeling pretty strong about this area if they can get their vote out. Reform are riding a national wave, and they came third overall in the region, so they're going to fancy their chances. Conservatives, they have 3 MPs, but they were run pretty close both by Labour and by Reform in the region, so they might be feeling pretty nervous, although they are running a minority council in the area of the East Riding of Hull. Labour, ordinarily, they would have been a favourite. They got 37% of the vote in the general election. If that election had been happened on the same day, I would have said they would have walked this and got the Metro Mayor, but it's a year later. Governing's difficult, and they've made cuts to the winter fuel payment. They've made cuts to the disability welfare, the PIP payments. So personal independence payments. This is going to probably cost them votes in the region. Greens, I don't think they're likely to pose a threat. I just don't think they're going to pose a threat here. They polled under 5% last time, but what they can do is steal precious votes from Labour and Lib Dems, particularly Labour. Labour will be wanting to get as many votes as possible from the left of their left flank of the party, but I think many Labour voters on the left of the party are going to be dissatisfied with the approach that Labour has taken, particularly around cuts. And then the Yorkshire Party, I don't think they're likely to retain their deposit. You've got to get 5% of the vote to retain your deposit. It's £5,000 to run as a Metro Mayor in this country. But in a very close election, even if 2% of people vote for the Yorkshire Party, that could be vital, because I think it's going to be really knife-edge stuff in this election. Very, 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 very close. It will be really interesting to see how this one turns out. It's all to play for. There's low turnout. Lib Dems got to be feeling quite confident. But the other 3 major parties have a very good chance. Labour on the defensive, Reform are polling well, and the Tories are potentially having their vote split between Reform and Conservatives on the right-hand side, feeling nervous. But yeah, a vote share of 25%, as low as that, could win this, which is very, very unusual. And in fact, we've got a 4-way marginal, quite unusual in British politics. So very, very exciting. For those who are interested in where we got the data for this preview and review of the election, I'll share all of these in the description of the video and in the podcast if you're watching this or listening to this on the podcast. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. That was the preview of the Hull and East Riding of Yorkshire Combined Authority podcast. This was the Democracy Briefing podcast. Please, if you can, like and subscribe, share as much as you can. We will be doing more of these videos, and we will be doing the other Metro Mayors, and then after the election we will be reviewing the elections and doing a readout of what actually happened. Thank you very much, and as ever, remember to vote.